The United States pledges military support for Israel as fighting with the militant group Hamas enters a third day.
Mourners in Afghanistan continue to bury their dead after Saturday's 6.3 magnitude earthquake. At least 2,400 people have been killed.
The Nobel Prize for Economics has been awarded to Harvard professor Claudia Goldin for her work on the gender gap in the U.S. labor market.
Israel's war with Hamas has entered a third day. Overnight, Israeli troops targeted hundreds of sites with suspected links to the militant group in the Gaza Strip. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved the offensive after declaring war on Sunday and urged civilians in Gaza to evacuate. At least 770 Israelis have been killed since Saturday when Hamas launched the surprise attack. Hundreds have been taken hostage and thousands injured. Israel has stationed around 100,000 reserves near Gaza. Members of the UN Security Council have denounced Hamas. The US has pledged military support for Israel. A Palestinian representative to the UN says the attack comes after Israel's killing of hundreds of Palestinians this year and unrelenting military raids. Meanwhile, paramedics have recovered the bodies of 260 people killed by Hamas fighters at a music festival in Israel's south on Saturday. Palestinian officials say Israel's counter-offensive has killed at least 413 Palestinians and injured more than 2,000. Israel says it's targeting Hamas military officers and command centres. One airstrike is said to have killed 19 members of a Palestinian family in a Gaza refugee camp. Israeli airstrikes have all but levelled the town of Bai Hanaun.
Rockets from Gaza raining down on cities. Hundreds of Hamas militants massacring soldiers and civilians in Israel and taking more than 100 hostages. It's a nightmare come true and made possible by three catastrophic failures, according to Peter Lerner, an Israeli national security expert.
Overconfidence in the military's understanding of the defense mechanisms that exist, whether it's the Iron Dome, or the barrier that was completed a couple of years ago, and there was full faith in the ability to prevent subterranean attacks, the lack of intelligence, and ultimately the failure of the defensive line itself. So you have these three circles of defense that did not do what they should have.
Israel's intelligence service is world-renowned, but its conclusions did not help to prevent the attacks.
Just a few weeks ago, senior defense officials and intelligence officials were saying that Hamas is not interested in a widespread conflict, precisely because of previous conflicts that they're still licking their wounds, precisely because they want to maintain and rule the Gaza Strip and not put that rule at threat. This is obviously a miscalculation, a grave miscalculation of the intelligence community.
Lerner believes the army will move cautiously with hostages still held in Gaza, and once the war against Hamas is over, he expects a thorough investigation into security failings before Israel's equivalent of 9/11.
Survivors of Saturday's deadly earthquake in western Afghanistan burying their dead. Authorities say 2,400 people have died after a 6.3 magnitude quake and 8 aftershocks struck 30 kilometers northwest of the city of Herat. Another 4.2 magnitude aftershock was felt in the same area on Sunday morning. Rescue teams are still trying to recover people trapped beneath the rubble, but digging equipment is in short supply and communicating between remote villages is difficult. A Taliban spokesperson from the country's disaster management ministry said the earthquake was, quote, unprecedented and warned the death toll was sure to rise. Meanwhile, the Afghan Red Crescent has managed to get aid into the Zinda-Jishan district in the Herat province. Tents, tarpaulins, water storage materials, blankets, clothing, kitchenware and food are being distributed. Afghanistan is frequently hit by earthquakes. In June last year, the province of Paktika was hit by a 5.9 magnitude quake, which killed more than 1,000 people and left tens of thousands without a home.
Since these pictures were released by Turkey's defense ministry on Friday, its attacks on Kurdish bases in northeastern Syria and Iraq have intensified. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 20 people were killed and 50 injured in a Turkish air raid on a militia training center near Hasaka on Monday morning. Turkey's airstrikes follow a suicide bomb and gun attack on a government building in Ankara on October the 1st, when 2 police officers were injured. The latest United Nations human rights study on Ukraine reports more than 4,600 civilian casualties from the start of February to the end of July, including 1,028 people killed.
The testimonies of survivors describe unimaginable cruelty, including terrifying accounts of electric shocks, sexual violence, and severe beatings, which in some instances led to broken bones and smashed teeth. Countless detainees were also forced to praise the Russian Federation, learn and sing Russian songs, and suffered severe beatings for failing or for speaking Ukrainian. Appalling detention conditions, including food and medical shortages, poor living conditions, and sleep deprivation, persisted.
The latest findings bring the UN's tally of civilian deaths since Russia's full-scale invasion to almost 10,000. And since it only counts fully documented cases, the full death toll is likely to be much higher. The UN's also concerned about forced assimilation in occupied territories, with civilians forced to take Russian passports or face persecution.
A NATO mission training soldiers in bomb disposal used in conflicts throughout the world is now a crucial part of the multinational exercises supporting the Ukrainian military. Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD, involves the location, identification, render safe and disposal of dangerous unexploded conventional, chemical and biological as well as improvised explosives, often hidden in innocuous places, designed to lay a trap for soldiers and bomb disposal teams. For over 20 years, Northern Challenge has been an annual Icelandic Coast Guard-led exercise. This year involved 16 nations, over 400 participants, including the US Marine Corps.
Here we're trying to give everyone, all the EOD teams, the experience of real-life scenarios that are occurring worldwide in a training environment so that they can learn what those items are, how to defeat them safely, and ensure the safety of their fellow troops. A lot of times in Iraq or Afghanistan, it'd be very basic, homemade type things, where today we're seeing more conventional munitions employed in an improvised manner. The threat stays the same, and the way that we treat a lot of those stays the same.
The nature of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine means a huge number of troops are not professional infantry men and women, but regular Ukrainian civilians forced to fight for the future of their country. But the senior military personnel in charge of the programme say the lack of frontline experience is compensated by the motivation of recruits to fight for their lives.
I've trained quite a lot of Ukrainians in the last 12 to 18 months, and these people are fighting for their lives. It doesn't matter what they did before. They think way differently than we do. We're preparing for something. They're fighting for their lives. Their willingness and desire to learn as quick as they can so that they can go back home and either save lives, protect lives, or ultimately push Russia back out of their country. You know, there's no greater impetus than that.
Meanwhile, NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels this week, attended for the first time by newly appointed Defence Minister of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov. The consistent supply of weapons remains a key concern for Ukraine, particularly after the commitment to continue support was removed from a bill in US Congress aimed at avoiding a government shutdown. Shona Murray, Euronews, Keflavik, Iceland.
The Nobel Prize in Economics has been awarded to Harvard University professor Claudia Goldin for her research on the gender gap in the U.S. labor market. an accomplishment that is a tiny step towards the Nobel Prize closing its own gender gap, as Golden is just the third woman to win the Economics Prize out of its 93 laureates. Using 200 years of data, Golden revealed some of the reasons why women's pay has not caught up to men's, despite women reaching higher levels of education. Information that allows policymakers to try to tackle the problem. The votes are in, and Greece's conservative New Democracy Party has come out on top of Sunday's local elections. The party of Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis won 7 of the country's 13 regions, including one of its largest, Athens, and now is hoping to take the other 6 in the second round.
Νομίζω ότι δεν υπήρχε κάποιο συγκεκριμένο μήνυμα σε αυτές τις εκλογές. Απλά βγήκαν κάποια συμπεράσματα επιβεβαιώνοντας κάποια πράγματα τα οποία είδαμε και στις εθνικές εκλογές. Το πρώτο είναι η κυριαρχία του κυβερνώντος κόμματος στο εκλογικό σκηνικό. Ένα δεύτερο συμπέρασμα μικρό είναι το γεγονός ότι η Κασελακιάδα και αυτό το γκέλ το οποίο έκανε ο κύριος Κασελάκης στα μίντια αλλά και σε κάποιους ψηφοφόρους του ΣΥΡΙΖΑ δεν το βλέπουμε σε επίπεδο εθνικού εκλογικού σώματος.
New Democracy's victory comes despite criticism the ruling party faced for its response to wildfires and floods that plagued the country over the summer.
3 μήνες μετά από τις εθνικές εκλογές, η ψήφος των πολιτών στις αυτοδιοικητικές εκλογές επιβεβαίωσε το πολιτικό σκηνικό που έχει διαμορφωθεί. Εκτός όμως από το κυβερνών κόμμα που επικράτησε και η αποχή, που έφτασε σχεδόν το 70% στο μεγαλύτερο δήμο της Ελλάδας, στο Δήμο Αθηναίων.
Voters will return to the polls on the 15th of October for a second round runoff.